everybody. Welcome to the Recovery Capital podcast. My name is Joanna Dolan. I am one of the hosts here at Recovery Capital. And just to let you know that Recovery Capital is the internal and the external resources that we have that help us to obtain, maintain, and sustain recovery. So whether you are someone who is new to the pathway, you are someone who's been on the pathway for a long time, or maybe even in between, right? Or you're someone who is on the recovery care team and supporting what we do. We believe that we have something for you, especially today. So I'm really excited about our guest. But before we go into our guest, letting him introduce himself, I'm going to go ahead and let Amy introduce herself. Amy, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, guys. My name is Amy DePietro, and I'm co-host on the Recovery Capital podcast. I'm super excited about being here today. This is my first time meeting Tom, well, virtually anyway, in this capacity. I have heard amazing things about Tom and the work that he's doing. And I'm super excited to get started today. So I say we jump right in.
Right on. Tom, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm feeling we're going to get to know me along the path with all the questions that we're going to be going back and forth with. So I don't know what to say. So I'm Tom Karl. I'm the founder and CEO, the grateful founder and CEO of R1 Learning. We're building engagement, educational tools around the fundamental topics in substance use disorder, mental health conditions, and life skills, for the community to be working with, just all levels of people. We're working with practitioners, meaning everything from clinicians to recovery coaches to peer support providers, any educator in the behavioral health field. And really the real goal is to having them work with people going on the recovery capital journey, right? People that are on their own journeys to their own mental health and wellness, and helping them. And I'll stop here, just self-discovery, learn something about themselves so that they can gain new insights, and be able to find the words to express themselves more effectively and get the kind of help that they need for themselves and from other people that are there to support them. So that's kind of our goal and mission at R1 Learning. Yeah.
Right on. So the reason Amy said that she feels like she already kind of knows you is because I talk about you in just about every recovery coach class I do.
It's true. She really does. I can attest to that.
I'm honored. I am honored.
Not just talks about you, but uses your material.
So cool. I never dreamed I would have people like Joanna who are really leaders in the field, using our tools, and with the people that she's worked with. So I'm just grateful to be here with both of you.
Yeah, well, we're grateful to have you. So let's just dive right in, right? Because I believe that you are one of my heroes, and one of the reasons that you are my heroes are one of my heroes is because you took your own journey and you turn it into something useful that we all can benefit from. So can you tell us why you started R1?
Yeah, boy. I didn't say that in my introduction, and I'm learning to say it more. I try to come at this thing from more of my professional background, my background in corporate education, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But the truth is I'm here because of my own recovery journey. I am a peer. I've been somebody who's been struggling with alcoholism in my adult life, and it caught up to me in my 40s and threw me into behavioral health. I was sharing with Amy earlier, threw me into my first detox in 2000. December 17, 2011. I couldn't manage my work. I was flying around the country for this company working on engagement for the corporate, every Fortune 1000 company in the country. I couldn't manage that anymore. I couldn't help my parents out that were struggling. My dad was dying from alcoholism, esophagus cancer at the time, and I was just found myself in behavioral health, and long story short, went through my own path, different roles, ended up back in treatment a couple of times, open heart surgery along the path because I was so unhealthy at the time. Whew, lot of consequences for my journey, and then found myself in a setting once again at the beginning of 2017, and was just there, just trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do with my life. I had a lot of recovery, but I still was not, I hadn't figured it all out yet. As like many people, had relapses and a lot of sober time, and but then what happened is in my last setting, it was a detox setting at a local hospital. I won't name the hospital, but it was wow. I was there for 5 days, and oh my God, we did nothing. We couldn't even find I do 12-step as part of my toolkit. We didn't even have a big book. I mean, we didn't have anything. There was nothing, and the groups were very non-engaging. And all of a sudden, I said to myself, "Where are all the tools from my corporate experience? Like, where are the tools? Why aren't there any tools in this thing?" And so when I came out of that in January of 2017, I was just like, I'm just going to do some exploration, and that's where it started. I started to go, let me just go see what's out there and see if there's, something else that we could help bring to the party. Yeah, that was the beginning of it. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Go ahead, Amy.
It's super incredible to me because I guess I just assumed that you'd been doing this for like a couple decades, quite frankly. Like, I mean, the information I've seen from like Joanna, like from your content is so robust. Like, it's very robust. There's so much there. It's impressive that you've been doing this not nearly as long as I thought that you had. So it's wild.
I appreciate it, Amy, and Joanna knows this. In fact, Joanna and I were talking about this last evening, and the truth is what I'm doing is I'm repackaging. I'm a packager. I'm a repackager. So the first thing I did was I went out and said, let me learn about this behavioral health space. Let me go out there and look at, oh my gosh, so coming from my corporate lens, I was like, look at all the beautiful behavioral health models. Oh my God, there's beauty here. And how come they're not being used? And so, what I did and this is why the compliment, thank you, but don't thank me. Thank Dr. Prochaska and Dee Clemente. Thanks Shalom Schwartz. Thank Dr. David Best. Thanks Terrence Gorski. We're just grateful to have been able to connect with them and say, hey, I've got this little idea to take your beautiful work and just put it in another format so people could use it. And they were beautiful people. And they said, you know what? They were so open. They gave me their time and they helped me, and they contributed. And so they helped me repackage their own work into the R1 learning system is what happened. And so that's really what's happened is we just packaged people's beautiful work, repackaged it into this thing called the R1 learning system. And we just keep on asking for help and getting it out there.
Okay, so before we go much further, I want to break down some of these definitions and the words that you're using, right? So, because I want to make sure that everybody that's listening is on the same page, right? So when you say engagement, what does that mean?
That's great. So for me, I mean, there's so many levels of engagement, right? Getting people, but for me, at the most basic level is that you get people to a place where they want to participate. They're interested. They're leaning in to, in this case, learning about themselves, right? Learning about where they are on this path. So engagement for me is to figure out how to meet them where they are, open them up to, to be able to learn and give them the tools that, and this is key, Joanna, right, is to meet them in terms of their own learning styles. so that they can process this information the way that they want to process it, not the way that this coach wants to process it, this clinician wants to process it, the educator wants to process it, but the way that they want to process it.
Okay, I gotcha. So, okay, so there's a couple of questions there, right? Because you're right, like everybody has a different learning style. So that means everybody has a different way that they process information, right? Or that's what I'm hearing you say.
I mean, we have commonality in it, but we all do it. We like different ways of doing it. Some people like to be like lecture. They like to sit there and listen. They're verbal learners. Some people really like to see models and frameworks. Some people want to do something experiential, hands-on, do something, right? And so we want to create experiences for people that allow them to tap into that content, which is evidence-based best practice through these beautiful thought leaders, and be able to tap into that in the way that they'll get the maximum benefit from it, right? Because, you know, we're going to try to hit them from all these different perspectives so that we try to catch them in the way that they like to process information.
It makes a lot of sense because I like, as you were saying that, I mean, when you said some people appreciate like the lecture style, I mean, on a personal note, Joanne, I don't know about you, but I'm more of a see one, do one, teach one.
Yeah.
Like that's the way I really kind of absorb new information. So it's really nice that there's, we're talking about meeting people where they're at. So there's different ways to kind of learn what you guys are putting out there.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm the same way. Like I have to see it, I have to play with it, I have to internalize it, I have to teach someone else it.
Yeah, right.
Because it makes me look at it from like the audio and the visual and the kinesthetic, and you know, I have to connect.
Yeah.
And that's what helps me to internalize. So yeah.
Yeah, and I love that what you just said, Joanna. It's for me, it's that internalizing it, right? To make it mine, have me own it, right? Have me understand it for me and my own situation. In fact, a lot of things that we do with the cards, the discovery cards, we haven't even talked about the tools yet, you know, but it's to get people to situationally use these concepts for their own sake, so that they can internalize it for them and their situation, right?
It makes sense, Ray. If you think about, I don't know about you guys, but I think about my active addiction. I certainly had to see one, do one, and I don't know how much teaching I did, but I did a lot of, you know, field research in my active days. So it makes sense that I gotta.
We call that experiential learning.
I did a lot of experiential learning there.
Right, that's beautiful, Amy.
I totally get that. Okay, so I got 3 more definitions I think we need to get before we can keep going, right? So I'll tell you what they are, and then you can just pick which ones to. Okay, so we got to define tools. We have to define behavioral health models, because you know, when you said that, I was like, wait, is he talking about concepts or is he talking about locations and ways of delivering service?
Yeah.
And also evidence-based best practice, because that's a term that's thrown around a lot. That I think people really need to know. I mean, you see it in marketing, everything.
Right. Yeah.
So which one of those 3 do you want to start with? Because I think that like will give us all the language we need to be able to keep the conversation going.
The first one, I'll go back on the first one there that you listed. It was before behavioral health models was the tools. Yeah. So when I think about tools, wow, such a great question. I didn't prepare for this, but tools for me are, things that are outside of myself that help me, give me an avenue, a pathway to the information that I'm going to learn, right? And so we all know tools. We all know tools like, hey, books, or little videos, or going to a classroom where there's a lecturer, right? For me, these are all tools, right? Like in recovery, I have my networks, my tool. I have my, calling Sam or Frank. These are tools for me. Going to recovery meetings are tools. Making sure I do something physical every day and active every day, and go to bed early. These are all my tools. Drinking water, drinking fizzy water. It's a tool, And so for me, these are all tools, and I think about them the same way with learning. there's so many different ways to learn that they're all tools for me. And I've chosen a format of a tool around card decks is a format of a tool. It's a form of a tool that we chose to package the content in, right? But, you know, tools are PowerPoint slides, tools are visual models, tools are, you know, technology. You and I are working on some technology solutions with a wonderful company called Glue out in Colorado, right? And
Yeah.
these are all tools, right? They're all tools. I don't know if that makes sense. Does that help?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Those are the things that I think, well, for me, I know that they're tools, they're technology. But I think a lot of the people that I interact with just think of them as objects in the room,
Yeah. Right.
you know?
And so, yeah. One of the things that we're selling as part of the R1 learning system with these we're going to get to it next, behavioral health models, right, is posters. Hey, posters. Posters are tools for me, right? Look at you. What are you doing? Yeah, inserts, infographics are tools. You know, and what I've learned is, and people are buying, I was with a group yesterday, they're buying 10 of these for a place in Albuquerque, New Mexico, another place in Oakland, California, buying 10 of our posters, our 36 by 48s, right? Because they're going to put them up in the recovery rooms or the treatment center rooms, and they're tools, because when people are in the rooms and they're doing whatever they're doing, hey, some people are just scanning, some people are looking, some people are just staring at the wall. And while they're staring at the wall, they're looking at a tool where they may learn about stages of change, their emotions and feelings, right? And so this is a tool. Just this thing hanging on the wall is actually a learning tool in certain settings.
Wow, thank you for that.
That makes sense? It does.
My mind just went
how
boom.
many of you, right, and people listening have actually been in a room and you're staring around, you're looking, you see something that's kind of cool looking, you kind of examine it and you're thinking about it. Well, what you're doing is you're processing information, learning about the concept, whatever's on that poster, you know? So
I swear to God, I think that's exactly how I ended up memorizing the 12 steps and the 12 traditions. You know what I mean? Like, you don't even realize it, but you're sitting in a room, you're listening, but there they are on every wall in every meeting room you ever walk into, and you read it.
you do. In fact, that's one of the things I learned in 12 step is they always have the steps, they always have the traditions. A lot of the groups that I go to always have the preamble, right? Those are tools for AA.
Yeah, right on.
Right on. Yeah.
I love that. Okay,
Yeah.
so tell us about behavioral health model. What is that? What do you mean?
Let's just end up where we were. A behavioral health model is the 12 steps, is a behavioral health model. It's a model, in fact, it's a process model. It's saying that there's these 12 steps, it's a process, and you go through them and you have an outcome. Wow, it's actually evidence-based because there's evidence that they work. So there you go, Joanna. That's an example of a behavioral health model, right? And we know there's evidence because if you've been in that setting, you see people have good outcomes. And that is evidence that the process that people are experiencing in that room is working, right? So I think that's a simple example for people that use 12-step as a tool, right? As a tool, 12-step is some people's all recovery pathway, but for some people it's a tool in their bigger set of tools and on their bigger, on their own pathway.
That makes perfect sense because one of the things that I use we started off saying it, right? Like, I use your tools in my classes because I want people to understand stages of change,
right.
And I want to change the way that they think from, people have to hit the bottom, they have to hit their own personal bottom before they get better. And we know that that's not true. They have to come to awareness. They have to move through the stages of change in order to have a new experience. And sometimes change can happen,
right.
by the snap of a finger. And sometimes it takes decades.
Yep.
And when you can help someone, you can help yourself to go through it. So having the tools helps me to take the 12-step model or, like this big, massive concept, break it down into something really small and very
Yeah.
tangible that it's a map. So that's what I hear you saying, is that behavioral health models are the maps that help us to get from where we are to where we could be and where we want to be.
I think, and that's one of the reasons why you and I are so aligned on these paths. You know, we here we are today, right? Is because I think we see this very similarly, that these are maps. They're guidance systems for people, and they help people learn the information a lot more quickly because they have a guidance system. You know, it's a map, and yeah, so those are great. I mean, and there's all sorts of maps. So I use the 12 steps as an example, right? You brought up stages of change. It's one of the definitive models in behavioral health. I didn't even learn about it until I started on R1. I'd been in recovery since 2011. I started R1 in 2017. What happened in 6 years? I never learned that there was even a change model out there. You know, what was that about? And then I learned about it, and I was thinking, boy, this is a really helpful map for me. You know, I can see where I was. Boy, I was in pre-contemplation for a long time. Who knew? Nobody told me that there was even this concept of being in pre-contemplation. It would have helped me to know that, just because that's the way I learned, but I didn't get the chance to learn it because nobody gave me that tool, right?
That makes perfect sense. You know, one of the things I'm sitting here thinking is like, because I'm like you, right? I got sober in 97. I was working in the field myself as a minister, doing spirituality classes to help people to have a metaphysical minister, right? Like not a particular, you know, but someone that helped people to connect to spiritual technology, to have their own experience with whatever it is that we are connected to, right? And so I was going into classes, having conversations with people, teaching them technology about, you know, like using mindfulness and meditation, and how to read sacred texts and what to think about when you're doing all those things, right? And using the old 12-step speakers, and you know, having, you know, pulling apart a big book and a NA book, and saying, hey, when they're talking about this is what they're talking about.
Right.
And it wasn't until I like made that transition to mental health that I was able to see these models that really supported me. You know, like I'm with you, like I had no idea stages of change actually existed until 2015 when I was going through my own cancer journey.
I know, and then I mean, it's a beautiful example, right? And here's the shifting of this industry, right? And I'm still running. I'm new to this industry, but you know, stages of change used to be a clinical tool, and guess what? Only clinicians were supposed to know about it. And it was the tool behind the curtain that they were using to assess people in terms of their own way that they were going to coach and guide people and clinically support people, which is awesome, right? But you know, why not let that individual see it too? Well, that, you know, it's all moving to that, right? And that's what's been shifting over the years. And so, but this whole idea of putting it in people's hands, those tools, is sort of what R1's about. Well, we're literally going to put them in people's hands. I mean, literally give you the tool so that you can self-diagnose. You can find yourself inside these concepts and discover where you think you are, and not anybody else. And you get a first cut at it, and then you can then kind of be able to share it and talk about it, and then get some coaching. So, hey, maybe I'm not here. I think I'm here, and maybe with some other help, I can keep moving down or get other insights. But we literally want to give those words, that vocabulary to other people, so that they can start to make those choices for themselves and not be, you know, guided from external forces all the time. Because like you said, I have to internalize it. I can't change unless I internalize it. You can't make me change. I have to, you know, be able to do that for myself, you know, and that's where, you know, and these behavioral health models, I'm going to stay with the models for 1 second, and they're beautiful models out there. And I find it, for me, is I need that kind of stuff. I need to, like, when I talk about emotions and feelings, it was helpful to come up with 8 emotional types and then come up with sets of feelings underneath them. When we talk about boundaries, well, what do you mean by boundaries? Well, we've helped define, 5 external boundaries and 3 internal boundaries. And now we can talk about what boundaries are. And we even talked about, hey, what are 5 boundary management practices that help me manage boundaries? So these things help, stages of change. There's 5 stages of change, right? Hey, there's 5 phases of addiction. Let's teach that, and it's all, and then we want to go into values. There's 10 value orientations according to Schwartz, and John Holland on career interest said there's 6 interest types that are the basis of the occupational ONET and the occupational handbook out there. So these models and frameworks help people to have the maps, right? And that's helpful. It's helpful. Yeah. And then last thing is underneath the maps, right? Underneath the maps are words, are further distinctions. Like, so what do you mean by, career interests? What do you mean by, what are some actual values, And so giving people that next level of definition helps people to then articulate what's happening with them.
That makes perfect sense to me. And so what I also hear you saying is that R1's discovery cards and other solutions help to make certain that people, no matter whether they have access to a clinician or not, they will have the access to the information that they need to move along the recovery pathway. Is that accurate?
More helpful. But yeah, I think that putting these concepts and these things into people's hands and allowing them to have access to them is a good thing. There's a lot of people out there I've learned that have self-directed recovery, and there's a lot of people, and so let's support those people in being more self-directed in their early stages of recovery.
Right on. Okay.
Right.
I mean, I'm right there with you. Like,
I know you are.
I didn't even know that people that addiction treatment was a possibility for most people until after the Parity Act. So like for me and for all, like, I mean, I know some people with like 30, 40 years of recovery, like it was not available to them. I know people with 10 plus years of recovery, it was not available to them.
Right, exactly. Still not available to a lot of people. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And here's the other piece. I want to throw this in, and then I'm going to go back to your question. But I started this thing to help the individual. Really, I wanted to put that. I mean, exactly what I said. You read the top of the card decks. Find yourself and change your life. Learn about yourself, self-discover, make new choices. Try to be able to articulate, get help, all that stuff. Right, really important. And then I started talking to some of the thought leaders, and they said, "Tom, this is really cool. We like what you're doing, but just don't lose this. Don't lose this idea." We still think there's a gap out there for practitioners that really think they know stages of change, or they think they know the recovery capital, and they think they know that they really need some help too. And we think that your learning system, one of the major values that you probably don't even think you're trying to bring, you could bring, is helping the practitioners learn these concepts more concretely so that they can be better at helping other people go through those concepts and theories. And I was like, well, that wasn't my plan, but I can see what you're seeing and I hear what you're saying. And I'll be honest with you, I've shifted a little bit in R1 learning, because that's where I think we're going to have the biggest impact, is in helping practitioners and educators be able to be more effective in their own support of other people.
I'm right there with you. I mean, like, in fact, that was why I started bringing these into, we train recovery care team, right? Everybody. So if they're a support or recovery coach or counselor or doctor or, the office manager, like we train those folks.
Exactly. Yeah.
And one of the things that I was finding is that, we had counselors coming in who are drug and alcohol certified counselors who had no idea what stages of change were.
Absolutely. The whole team did.
Yeah. So like being able to.
Can I ask you a question here though?
Yeah.
Why do you think there's a gap? As somebody that's not a clinician, I'm just getting started in the peer-to-peer movement. Why is there a gap?
Joanne, you want to take that? I'll jump in. Go ahead. Yeah.
So I think there's probably a lot more reasons for the gaps than what I suspect. And so my guess is that clinicians today tend to be people without lived experience. Clinicians 10, 15 years ago had lived experience, so they were able to, apply what they were learning to themselves and then apply it to somebody else. And there's a really big difference when you are learning something from a book and then when you go and you actually
apply it. Yeah, right.
So what do you think, Tom?
Oh, I'm just building on what you just said, which is what I'm right with you. Right with you is, and I've heard that too. I don't have all the stats on it, but I've been there's a lot more early career people coming into behavioral health that have no substance use in their family system, right? So they don't have the words that, and they don't see that, they don't have that experience of seeing it in real life, right? So some of the R1 learning system tools, they like it because it gives them the word phases of addiction, gives them behaviors around what does it look like? How do I spot those behaviors? And so it's helpful. They don't have that. So there's a gap for that. Some of those reasons that you mentioned. The other part, Amy, I think is it's just basic. We only have so much time in the day, and we have a lot of we have a lot of things we have to do. And even in the peer, and I mean, hats off to CCAR. Hats off to all the peer certification bodies out there that are helping you guys get people get credentialed. It is critical. And even with that, there's only so much you can do there because you can't take on everything. In fact, where R1 wants to play is not there. We think that that's great. Good job, hats off, keep rocking. Where we want to play is after that, when you get to what you were saying, Joanna, now I got to get into practice. I got to start applying and really get into how do I help people with triggers? How do I help people manage boundary issues? How do I help people, really look at emotional regulation and think about coping skills? That's where we also want to play more, is more the competency building piece that comes in practice. And that only comes in, and so there's gap because people don't have the time, they don't have that experience to put it into practice, they don't have the setting to practice. And that's where it all kind of comes into play, right? It's time, getting the right setting, getting that the way that I can actually practice this stuff, and then having tools to practice it.
Yeah, right on. So I want to say, like, before we move past this, because I think everybody that's listening, who's been listening all along, knows that I have a deep respect for clinicians. I'm on a lot of clinical teams. Yeah. So when I say that, I'm saying, like, you only know what you don't know, right? Like, I mean, you only know what you know. We rarely know we're rarely conscious about the stuff that we don't know. So, like, I have mad respect for everybody on the team. And I have tremendous respect for people who come into the field without knowing or loving one of us, because that takes a lot of courage. And I think that needs to be, like, I want to make that really clear.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm with you on that too. Yeah, and that's been evident to me just knowing you. So I'm glad you stated that for your audience. People that know you already know that, but it's awesome that that's good for you. I think that, one of the things, just to kind of build on the clinician piece, Joanna, is one of my biggest fears when I started R1 Learning was it wasn't a fear, but it was just like, this may be a barrier, is that the clinical folks were going to be resistant to the idea of these kind of tools, and that they would be like, no, we do it this way, we already have our stuff. And one of the things reason why I went with evidence-based best practice models was because it was already stuff that they were using, but I still thought there would be resistance. And I got to tell you, the best part of my experience on this path has been I have rarely gotten a pushback from a clinical team. I'm getting pulled in by clinical directors saying, you know what, this is really helpful for two things: to actually up the game of our clinical team and get them back into the basics and the fundamentals and get them kind of retooled and then be able to put it into practice. And I'm like, that's so, I didn't expect that openness. And maybe that was my own stuff layering it in, but man, they have been open, interested, see the value, and want to implement. So that's been kind of cool, not what I expected. Not what I expected.
I just love it when the world gives you what you don't expect.
So wrong. I was so wrong on that one.
Okay. So let's talk about what you guys have, right? So I have like a set of cards. I have them. Well, I got a boatload of them, but I just grabbed ones that would fit in my hand.
Good.
So
which ones do you have so I can get them in my hands? Which one are you pulling out?
So I pulled out, let's see, stages of change, recovery capital, healthy boundaries, emotions and feelings, and values.
Yeah. Perfect.
So like you've got these cards.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna pull out the stages of change because we've been talking about that. Okay.
I have to get my stages of change cards. Hold on. I was doing training yesterday and I had them in the other set. But go ahead. Keep going. Keep rocking. Got them.
So I don't necessarily want to go through it, but
no, I understand.
Okay. So in each deck, you've got a front page that says what it is and where it comes from. Dude, is it like this stages of change has been around since 1983, 82? Is that right?
Well, is that what it says on the card? What does it say?
Yeah. Yeah, 1983. Oh,
that would have been part of our research with Dr. Prochaska and DiClemente. So it's been around a while. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. They started with smoking cessation. That was their whole study was on smoking cessation. It came out of that work. So it's been around a while, right? Wow.
Yeah. And like none of us knew. Well, maybe some people knew. Okay, so we've got, I love it. That's why I love these cards. Okay, so you have information about the model, and then you always have like this little cute little card about R1 and what you do. But then you have activities in here.
Yeah.
So tell us just because the activities change in each one of these different cards.
Yeah.
So like, why do you have them? I know.
The activities cards, yeah. So the activity cards were use case, right? Use cases, right?
What does that mean? Use case.
Meaning, how are people going to use these tools? Are individuals going to use them? Are practitioners, are clinicians, are coaches going to use this with people? Hey, is this going to be something that's going to be done at a church? What's the different use case? How are they going to be used? And we saw from my other experience in my corporate work that when we had a card deck there around career interests, that some use cases were, hey, I'm going to buy this online, or I'm going to get this at the store, and I'm just going to buy a deck. And so the deck might be out there by itself without any other support. And so the black cards were a way for me to try to make my way through what can I do with the card deck if I just get the card deck. And so the black cards gave me a way to do an activity as one type of use case, just me getting the card deck, doing something, what do I do with it, right? And we're also there, the other reason why we put them in there was, hey, maybe a practitioner gets them and wants to give, hey, I can't meet with you, Joanna, right yet, because I got 30 more minutes. Before you and I meet, can you go through this card deck and do activity 2, and then we'll talk about it. So that's another use case of me using it as a tool with somebody else, and the black cards help me communicate to that person what I want them to do. I don't have to explain it. I don't have to tell them. I say, hey, read that black activity 2 card and go do that. So I don't know. How am I doing? Make sense?
That makes perfect sense to me. Okay, so then we've got these activities, so we can do them, we can use them, and then in each deck you've got a little picture of what the model is. Like, does the how do you come up with the models? Because a lot of these models seem to be circles.
Yeah, I love circles. That's just part of it. Those are all out of the literature, We went to the literature and they had frameworks and models for stages of change. If you do a Google search right now, anybody who's using any kind of search engine, go do it, hit images, and you're going to get a lot of versions of stages of change. You're going to see all sorts of pictorial versions, visuals on it. Some will be circles, so they all have different ways that they packaged them. And so, we built our own visual representation of the model. And then we color coded it so that it would be a map, back to that map, right? It's a map for the rest of the cards in the deck.
I love it. Okay, so I can tell you that, so I use these cards in groups because I do large group works.
Yeah.
And so I'll use the cards inside of a group setting, and people steal the
model
visual,
cards.
the model card, and they'll carry them in their wallet. And then I've had a couple of people come up to me afterwards, months afterwards, and say, "Hey, I need to give this back to you. I took it, but it was really helpful." I'm like, "That was nice that you gave it back." And so do you find that people do you ever offer just the model card?
Such a great, so I have this little list of things for the development when we're still in early stage in our financial, we're still working on, this is, we're not billionaires, let's just say that, right? So one of the things that's on that list is a couple of things. One is to have more model cards, just a set of model cards that people can buy. And so instead of getting the decks here, you might get a deck of stage change model cards, or the other thing we also had, we're just going to have some me cards, because in the activities, the me card is actually an action card. And the me card, the idea there is at the end of the activity, you say, what am I going to do? What's the one thing I'm going to do related to what I found out about myself? And so we were going to have a whole bunch of me cards that you could then write on at the end of group. Everybody got a me card. What are you going to do today? Set one goal for yourself, right? So yeah, people do take the cards and then we need to come up with strategies for replacement. But usually what people do is they have some extra card decks and they use them to replace, right? And I'm sure.
Oh yeah, that's what I did. I've made some skeletons.
Yeah, exactly.
It's super helpful.
It is. And people steal a consequence card out of consequences, and they steal an emotion, maybe it's love, or maybe it's shame, or maybe it's, anger out of the emotions and feelings deck, because that spoke to them. And here's what I tell the people purchasing them: good, let those people have that, because they're going to carry that card around in their wallet or their purse or whatever they carry it in, and that will help their recovery, right?
Oh yeah. As we're saying, and I was like, well, maybe I shouldn't, because the coach in me is like, heck yeah, I'm so glad you took this.
Exactly. But the purchaser in me says, I got to maintain my tool and my resource, and then I don't want to lose money, right? So
exactly.
It's tricky. It's tricky. It is tricky.
That's awesome. Okay, so each set of these cards has definitions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That for us is probably the most important thing that we're doing at R1. And it is trying to come up with very succinct definitions for each of these frameworks, these models, these maps. I need to have very crisp words to help me describe those things. So every deck has a definition card for every aspect of the model. Yeah. So read one, like you've got the stage, maybe read one or two of those, and just so people can understand what they are.
Okay, so I've got pre-contemplation.
Yeah.
Pre-contemplation builds awareness for the need to change. This is the stage in which I have little or no consideration of changing my current pattern of behavior in the foreseeable future. And on the back of it, it says, it's got some words or phrases I might be saying. So I'm not sure I know how to get free from drinking or using. I don't think I could quit even if I wanted to. I don't want to be told what to do regarding my drinking or using. I haven't experienced any serious consequences as a result of my drinking or using. I really don't see many benefits to quitting. Quitting is not something I'm interested in doing right now. There's nothing I really need to change about my drinking or using. I'm a fairly normal drinker or user. And why should I stop? Yeah. I'm not an alcoholic or an addict.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Yeah, I mean, you see what we've done is on one side, we have a very brief description of that stage. And on the other side, this is key. We've made personalized behavioral based statements so that the individual that I can relate in to behaviors that I might be doing or thinking of related to that stage of the stages of change model. So now I get to say to myself, is that my thinking today? Am I in that stage the way I answer that personalized question? And so that's what's on, and that's the definition card. And then, as you know, having worked with the cards, those behaviors on the back of those cards are actually the sorting cards in the rest of the deck.
Yeah. So tell us about sorting.
Yeah. So hold those up. Maybe you've got the deck. I don't have my stages deck. I've got my other decks.
Okay. Let's see. Okay.
So for everybody listening, the stages of change have 5 stages. So we have 5 definition cards defining each of the stages. And then what we have in the deck, and they're color coded. Those stages are: orange is pre-contemplation, right? Green is preparation. Dr. Janice Prochaska, one of the things that she asked me, that's Dr. Jane Prochaska's wife, who's also a doctor, it said, "Hey, Tom, will you do me a favor in the color coding? Will you make preparation green? Like, go. Don't make action green. Will you make preparation green? Because that's the first move to action. Make that green." And so I said, absolutely, let's make that green. So
I love that. What in the action is like
blue. So then action is blue because preparation, she wanted it to be green. And I thought that was a really smart color code. Yeah. So then all of those sorting cards, then there's actually 40 sorting cards in the deck that are color coded to the model. And then you're showing up for people that might see it is there's a behavior. Each of those behaviors are on a card. So I can actually say, hey, does that make sense for me? Does that resonate with me as part of where I am today? Yeah. It's cool. And then what we do is we have people shuffle the deck. This is what we do, right? Mm-hmm. Hey, everybody shuffle the deck. And I want you to make 2 piles. These describe where I think I am today, or they don't resonate with me. Make 2 piles. Keep it real simple. It's binary. And people get to go through and just think about themselves and do this. And then we say, hey, great, put those cards that you didn't pick, put them back in the box. Now take the ones that you said do resonate. Hey, and now we want you to go a little deeper. Get to your top 10, and they get the top 10. They say, okay, now make a pyramid, kind of prioritize how you're thinking about yourself. And now people are really kind of thinking about where they are in this model. And it's really kind of cool. What happens next, Joanna?
Oh, gosh. So then they flip them all over and they self-diagnose.
And what happens when you're doing that as a coach? Is it fun to see that happen?
Oh, yeah. Because they're like, oh, I thought I was back here and I'm really here. Or they'll say, oh, I guess that explains why the counselor told me I'm not ready to change.
Yeah. Right.
And then they're like, but I want to be ready to change. Like it changes, it causes this, sometimes it causes this, it causes the resistance to go down long enough for them to say, wait a second, I want to, fill in the blank. Right. And then they start to have a new experience.
Yeah, I wish everybody listening to this had a card deck in their hands. So at one point in the future, you're not going to do this. We're going to have everybody go to a link, and they're going to hit a link, and they're going to do this with us and experience this for themselves. But this is why I love working with you. It's back to that internalization. It's what I see in that is when they turn the cards over, they get to internalize the cards that they pick and chose. They chose them, not the counselor telling them, not the coach saying, I think you're here. It was there. In fact, they kind of look at it like you tricked me. It's because they go, oh my God, this is where I think I am. I picked the cards. I'm the one who thought about them. And then I get to say, and then I get to stew on, is that what I really think? But coming from my own thinking, it's a whole different internalization. And I agree. It starts to drop those shields for people, which is part of what I'm trying to do with this whole system is have people just be honest with themselves, learn something about themselves, and then think about it and talk about it with other people. So, yeah, it's fun though too. It's really fun. I did it yesterday. I was teaching a bunch I was in the city, Washington D.C. for those that are listening around the country, and it was just fun. And these are people that are coaches. They're doing training, and they got to flip the cards over. And they looked at me like, "Oh my God, this is so cool!" This is like, they were laughing, and they're like, "Oh," yeah. And it's fun. It makes it kind of like the self-discovery is kind of like a journey. It's fun. It can be fun.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Oh my gosh,
So
yeah.
one of the things that I'm thinking about, like, so there's so many things I'm thinking, like, so there are these pitfall cards that come
Yeah.
along with it. And so for me as the coach, as the practitioner, right, is when I go through these with somebody, like we're able to have a conversation because they're like, like I'm thinking about this card action, right?
Yeah.
So the action pitfall is really important. It says there's a reluctance to ask for help, being too confident too quickly, lack of support from family for time needed for recovery, not prepared to make recovery a priority, burnout, taking on too much too fast, failing to revise the plan if it's not working, lack of focus on broader health needs, eating, sleeping, exercise, etc. So like what that says to me is like we need to have a conversation, a legit conversation, not hey, you have to watch out for these things, but a legit, let's plan.
Yeah.
Like, do you want to go to the next level? And if you don't, that's okay. Let's plan how to support you here. And like for action, I mean, these are things that like we can do that, right? And even with the pre-contemplation, like defense mechanisms, and let's have a conversation about harm reduction, risk management. And I see this, so like that's the conversation I'm having. And so when we bring in like a care coordinator whose whole job is to help them to get the resources that the recovery capital that they need, right? Like then they can have a real conversation and everybody's on the same page. So if it's one of those things like maybe it's best if you go to sober living for a minute,
right?
Then there's a actual, this is why the suggestions being made. And if you don't want to do that, then what would you propose instead to overcome this?
Yeah, I think this is beautifully well said, and a great example of this in real practice, Joanna. And this is where your experience in working with this, it just shines in the way you just explained it to me, right? It's just a beautiful example. And one of the things that I saw in it was, the tools, back to tools, they help support that conversation. The conversation is what's important. The conversation is the centerpiece, and you bring your experience, and you can do that without a tool because you have a lot of experience. But even with all of your experience and the way you did that, it's beautiful. But for the individual, sometimes it's good for them to have that list in front of them and they're reading it and they can see that and they can say, Joanna, that was really helpful, but this one really speaks to me. And so now again, you're bringing your experience, but they get to be part of the conversation. And tools are so interesting in how they can support, guide, give people other options. And so you see, even in that example, you can see how that can play out, right? And it's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Treating people as resources.
Pardon?
Treating people as resources. Everybody has their own answers inside of themselves, and these help us to help them to bring it out. I
know. This is what I used to say this in my other world was, what we're trying to do, and the relapse triggers, it's just a deck of triggers, right? They're categorized just like this one was. But, I believe that we all are struggling, especially people in early when it's really foggy and my brain chemistry is not working really well, right? I just can't think of all these things. I lose sight of them. And so just having some things to pick from is helpful, right? And so, it just brings into that space some of these ideas for me. One of the things I was just going to say about the pitfalls, and this is something I never expected with R1, and it's something that I'm very grateful for, is when I was working with, and I got to be careful, it being really, how I don't want to step out of it, any of my relationships, but when I was working with Dr. Prochaska and Prochaska's on this, and I brought this idea of the pitfalls and how can we help people see barriers. They didn't have any lists of that. I worked with them to create this, because I thought it would be helpful for people to see some of those things that might be holding them, not just the behaviors that they could move toward as goals, but what were some of those other things? And we even looked at emotions and feelings and explored the idea of what emotions and feelings were prevalent in these stages. We couldn't figure it out together, so we decided not to do it. But it was fun to brainstorm that. I was on a call today with Dr. David Bess, and we were re-looking at how we're going to communicate the model of recovery capital. We're going to reframe it, and it was just, and so I've been able to push on his thought process, and he's pushing on mine big time. But I'm able to bring some learning and how we're going to package this for coaches and that kind of stuff. And so, I feel like I'm even contributing at that level to the thought leadership and where they're headed at some level. So that's kind of, it's a system, right? We're all part of a system. It's kind of cool. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. As you say that, I'm like, I told you this last night. So Tom and I chatted last night before our conversation today, just because that's kind of what we do sometimes. We're friends, right? So I told you this yesterday. I am in awe of your ability to just call these people up and say, hey, I love this model. Like, would you talk to me about this? Like, that's not something everybody does. What do you have inside of you that just says, I can do this?
Yeah. Well, I had to, out of necessity, do it, right? Because here's a guy who's not in the behavioral health field, and he's going to try to play a role in the behavioral. This is 3.5, 4 years ago, right? And so I said to myself, I can't even get out, because I coming out of the other world. We had thought leaders in leadership, and so you had to tap into those models and frameworks there, so I knew I couldn't even get into this game unless I could work with, and have that credibility with a thought leader in a topic, right? So I had to reach out to the first one. But once I did that, and I saw that they were interested in expanding their work and being able to get it out there and that was really what I learned is they want to get the work out because they want to keep expanding the work and the research. So that was kind of cool. So they want help with that. But I think to answer your question is I think that what I learned is some of them have been doing some unbelievable work, but it's not getting out there to the level it could. And that's where that's not where their expertise is, and is getting it out. They're good at the research, they're good at the studies, they're good at all that. But like, I'll give you an example. And my God, this man I think his work is beautiful. Dr. Shalom Schwartz with values. He's one of the leader experts on values. He's built a model called the Schwartz Values Wheel, 10 orientations, highly researched, 80 cultures around the world, bucketed in 10 buckets of values, brilliantly aligned across an axis, and shows different concepts. You know what? It's a research project. It was never built to go out into practice and help people in this setting think about and look at their values. It was to study values. Right? So, wow, that's just coming from a different lens of being able to say, well, I think this is great stuff. Why isn't anybody using it? Well, it wasn't intended to be used, right? So now let's figure out how to use it. And whether that's an example of that, just pure research, or it's, just getting out Dr. David Best work. It's beautiful work. but let's get it in everybody's hands. Hey, you go ask 10 clinicians if they've ever heard about recovery capital, and 8 will say probably not.
Oh yeah.
Right? Or any practitioner, even peer coaches. Well, you ask anybody in the behavioral health field, what's recovery capital? And they couldn't tell you that it's personal capital, community capital, social capital, it's not out there. So one of our goals is to get it out there. Just get it out there in use, and then people will take it where it's supposed to go, right? So.
I actually just never thought about that.
I mean, I had never heard of it. Not that I should have, but as somebody that's in recovery, works in a treatment setting, and pays attention, just listens. And I had literally never heard of it until I took Joanna's class through CCAR.
Yeah. And that's that's one of the missions of R1 Learning, is really to, at the end of the day, is to, get out and engage people in the fundamental behavioral health topics and models, research, evidence-based, just get it out to the hands of people so they know about it and can use it and think about it and see if it makes sense for what they're doing. Some of the folks in this field are not good marketers. You know what? I get marketed to every day for substances, beer commercials. They're good, man. They're really good at it. They're experts.
Isn't that the truth?
Anything.
It's true.
The M&Ms, man, they sell me. It's right at my purchase counter, man. I get them every time I go. It's like, man, how'd they know I was going to be at the checkout counter again? Right?
Oh my God,
but they know how to
thought
get
of
it
that.
in our hands, right? We're not good. The behavioral health field is still working on how to get these great concepts into people's hands, and we haven't figured it out. And this is what we're all trying to do, is get people to be aware of it, right? And then explore it, and then see how it can be useful to them and relevant to them, and so that they can make choices and behavioral changes in their lives, right?
Wow.
It is pretty wild when you said that the doctor that you were working on, and I'm sorry, it was about values. I don't want to mispronounce his name. But
Dr. Shalom Schwartz.
Yes. All that work, so I guess I don't get it. Why go through all that time and money and effort? And the individual would obviously be very passionate about what they're doing, if you don't necessarily have an execution strategy. Is that's just the big disconnect?
And I can't get into all the specifics of his execution strategy and how it was used and not used, but there's a lot of people that do research for research's sake.
Gotcha.
There are people that are going to study why I picked up this pencil for 10 times, why I picked this out of and maybe there's people study stuff for no execution, just to learn about it. Yeah.
That's what I do.
It's and other people are doing it for execution's sake, but their expertise is in the research, and they're really good at it, and they're looking at and they're in all these environments to get a lot of different use cases. But again, they don't have the time and bandwidth to get it out there and broaden its use, right?
Yes, that is amazing. I never so really what I'm hearing you say is that I'm having a moment. When you reach out to people and say, hey, help me help other people, to communicate, to take your stuff and make it really super simple and applicable, what you're really doing is not just helping the recovery care team and the person who's in recovery, you're also helping the people that have created these.
Absolutely. This is why it all works, because we're a system and we're all stakeholders in a system. Unless all the stakeholders have a benefit of doing this, nobody does anything. So we have to we're trying to bring benefits to everybody that's a stakeholder in that system, right? And there's a benefit to everybody. That's the beautiful part of it, is there's a benefit to the thought leaders that are doing great work and have been doing it for 30 years. but there's still a benefit for getting it out there even further and getting it out there even quicker and better and in a technological format where you can actually do more research on it. It just, I mean, this isn't one of my, I have lots of little goals with we all have little goals, whether they get materials or not, but hey, I'd love to have all this stuff at CVS or Walgreens, and it's right at the counter by the M&Ms, and I can pick up defense mechanisms, and I can pick up, what substance use do I have a problem, and we put these concepts and theories right at the general public, and break down stigma and have them out there in the market, and so that people can all learn about behavioral health.
Wouldn't that be something right next to the People magazine?
Right next to the People magazine. We'll have emotions.
Healthy boundaries.
Healthy boundaries. Exactly. Right.
You know what though? Gosh, how empowering it would be for people to just understand. Talk about like just little peeks under the tent. I mean, obviously you can't do away with treatment centers, right? Like they all serve a purpose, but
yeah,
just a general
Absolutely.
awareness. I, as a layperson, as somebody that sorry about that. As a layperson it took a really long time to try and understand just even the tiniest little bit about myself. I look at some of these materials and I'm like, oh my gosh, I wonder what it would have looked like had I had even just an inkling of some of that.
I know, right.
Right. Not that you want to live there, right? Because that's a dangerous, slippery slope. But how exciting it must be for you every day to think that you're a part of something that future generations could be like really reaping not just today, but future generations could be really reaping the benefit from. I mean, think about if this was taught in school.
Well, these are the right kind of questions that we can't get there until the content's accessible, but you're right on it, and this is where, I mean, Dr. David Best is awesome. I mean, the man he's an expert in his field. He's doing stuff around the world. He's credentialed.
We gotta get a hold of him, Joanna.
I mean, he really is. And he's worked with Bill White. He's working with the Recovery Research Institute. I mean, he's just doing good work, and my little role in the whole concept, and you are doing it big time just in this podcast, is you're getting out the word. You're communicating it. Right now, we're talking about Dr. David Best and the work on Recovery Capital. You know what? More people are going to know about it. His work does matter. And I'm trying to push it out just like you are. I love this format of what you're doing. It's helpful, it's educating, it's breaking down stigma, it's introducing a new concept. I mean, it's helping him get his work out. I mean, you're helping him. You're helping him right now. You're helping me help him. You're helping him directly, and in doing that, you're helping yourselves. You're thinking about recovery capital for yourselves and helping yourself. And then you're helping everybody else that's listening to this, that is either helping people or trying to get help themselves.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that. I told Joanna, it was, I guess, the end of last week we were talking. I was like, this whole experience is changing my life.
Yes.
And I don't even really know quite how to articulate that much further right now, because it's just so much in like the best way. It's like sensory overload. It really is. But I don't know, like, how cool is it to you really, like, everybody that we've asked to be a part of this is like, yeah, 100%, let's do it. Like, nobody's making any money here. Like, we're just sharing information and having conversations and relating to one another. And just every week I leave the podcast just kind of like, I'm like quiet for a while, because you're just trying to absorb it all.
Mhm. It's cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, really is. Really
Yeah,
is.
it's cool when I see Joanna doing this and you're doing this, obviously, is it's such important work. This work matters. I mean, people are, we've all been there, and people are there to, as we speak, in much worse circumstances than I ever was, right? And and this work is really important, and you guys you're making the work matter. You're making it work, you're breaking down stigma, all this stuff is making a difference. And it happens this is what I learned, it happens in one conversation at a time, so, and you're now trying to amplify it to more conversations, and that's how change happens. So hopefully what you're feeling, because I feel it, is you're part of a change process. You're helping this industry change, you're helping yourself change, you're helping other people change for the person that they want to be, for the treatment center they want to be, for the researcher they want to be. You're supporting
Yeah.
that process.
Yeah, because last Friday, we usually do these on Fridays, right?
Yeah.
And so last Friday, I reached out to Joanna because we work on this together, but we're friends. And so I called her before early in the week and I said, listen, I have a really good friend and her fiance died, like he overdosed. And the services are on Friday. And we had somebody scheduled. And she was like, so I wanted to get her like, no, yeah, to go and do that. Don't, let's reschedule this, so on and so forth. And I was like, are you sure? I don't want to be dismissive of our project together. And she said, what are we doing if we're not there in those moments, right? Point taken, noted. And so I was sitting there, had to drive up to PA for it. I live in Maryland. And the whole way up, I was, it's emotional. I never met this man, never. But I knew that my friend was hurting. And so I was thinking about the whole way up there. And then I was thinking about everything that I saw, it was an incredible turnout. I mean, there was every bit of 150 people there, but, and so I just think, man, so that's one person who in recovery, because he'd been sober for a long time, touched all these people's lives in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
And now they're all grieving. Right. And so on the way home, I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking about the podcast and, all the things that we've been talking about and that I've been learning, and I've been learning from Joanna and our guests. And then I try to pass on what I learned to the people that I interact with. And so it wasn't lost on me that in this person's loss of life, it affected so many people, but there are people out there too, also trying to reach as many individuals as possible,
Right.
kind of in the complete polar opposite experience. And I just like welled up, like, it became very like super real. And, I just kept saying to myself, like, I don't want to go to any more of these, and if that means that we just keep the course and we just keep trying to do what we do and learn what we can. And, course of a week, you talk to X amount of people and they talk to X amount of people. We just have to keep going,
Absolutely.
we cannot be derailed. And thank God that people like you come up with these amazing thoughts, you know what I mean? And I don't know, there's a beauty in it all, right? Like it really is a mix of art.
I agree with that.
Science.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a mix of the art and of the science. And I'm just in awe of the process.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
That's what this is all about.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You didn't ask the big questions yet, did you?
I did not. You want to ask them?
I'll ask the one, you ask the other.
All right.
But you go first.
What's the big question?
I think you should ask the big one because you just led into it. Okay,
fair enough. So it's just kind of the build up to like our two final questions. No pressure, Tom, at all. No. They're not easy, but they're
You want a Stages of Change deck? Yes, give me your address. I'll send you.
Oh, no, I'll hit you up for that after. No, so when you retire, when you are, doing whatever in your twilight years, and you look back, you think about the work that you've done, what is it that you hope is, like, what do you want to be remembered about all that you've done here?
God, such a great question. Well, what I'm learning from someone, and I don't put myself in their same place because I'm not on that same path, but some of these folks on the thought leadership that I've been able to talk to, they're working and contributed into their 80s, and at some level, I think that they're going to continue to contribute until that last moment, because they have a passion for the work. Not that it's what they do, 24/7, that kind of stuff, but they're still contributing. And I think that that's beautiful. I think that's something that I do aspire to, is I want to contribute as long as I'm breathing, because I came close to dying at 51 when I had my heart surgery, and I'm like, man, this time is short. And so, I don't want to lose too much of it, and so I'm not that guy who's going to be sitting down doing nothing someday. So that's just one piece of it. And I think that people can contribute at all ages. So I think that's awesome. I know some 90-year-olds where my mom is, and they're still contributing on a big level. So it's pretty cool. But I think at the end of the day, I'm hoping that, boy, I wasn't prepared for that. I think it's just what's on the top of the box. That I'm hoping that people find themselves with some of the tools that we create, whether they're our online tools or some of the hard copy tools, or hit some of our videos. And I'm hoping that they just they'll find this insight, they'll learn something new about themselves that'll help them think more deeply, be able to process it, internalize it, Joanna. And then be able to make some new choices. And I think that's about as simple as I can get, is that we'll be able to impact people at some of those points when they're looking for that change.
Well said.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I love that. So we know that if you go to your website, there's blogs, there's videos, there's the cards, there's these nifty handouts and posters and all that. But what is the website? How do people get in touch with you? And also, how do people get in touch with you?
Well, that's easy. It's R1 Tom Karl. It's the company, r1learning.com. That's the number 1 learning.com. You didn't ask me that question. What does the R1 stand for? R1 actually stands for Recovery First. When I started R1, it was like, I heard this thing in recovery that I just loved. It was, right now I have to do one thing that's going to really help me along this path, is keep my recovery, my mental health, my physical wellness, all of it in the number 1 position, and everything else will be okay if I do that, So I made a note to self and said, that's a great idea. I think I'm going to call my company R1 for a number of reasons, because we want to help people keep that mental health, life skills, whatever it is, top of their list. And then I wanted it to be a reminder for me every day to keep my R1 first, so that I can keep doing this journey.
Oh, that's cool. I love that. I didn't know
r1learning.com. Hit the website. We've got some good information on it where you can learn about what we're trying to build, the models, the frameworks, great blogs. Thank you, Joanna. And then on there, there's the store, the R1 store, which has all the tools, and it's an e-commerce store. You can purchase stuff, and you can most importantly, you can share that with your friends. Tell all your friends, r1learning.com. No, more importantly, ask your friends to share it with their friends, and ask those people to share it with their friends, and just keep that going, because that's what's most important, and reach out to us. Yeah.
Can we share the discount code?
Absolutely, please. Absolutely.
All right, so the discount code, if you want to go ahead and pick up any of the tools at the R1 Learning store is Axiom, AXIOM, as in truth.
Yeah.
That's I mean, Axiom is a fundamental principle or truth, and R1 Recovery First is an axiom.
And I'm gonna reiterate that for everybody. Please use that discount code, right? Because that's part of this joint stakeholder thing. Because what that's gonna do is it's gonna help you, hopefully use the tools and help other people. B, it's gonna help R1 continue to build our business. And it's going to help Joanna and Amy with their business, being able to host this podcast. It's going to serve all of us by using Axiom today. So please, please, please use Axiom as the discount code when you go to the r1learning.com.
Thank you for that, Tom.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You guys rock. I didn't expect this to be so fun today. So, well, you know what? I did know it was gonna be fun. It's been a long week, so thank you for re-energizing me. This is Amy. I met you today earlier before the podcast, but you are lovely. I love the work that you're doing, and Joanna, I just got to say, you're a trailblazer. I think Amy and I were talking about you earlier. You really are.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, you're leading the way, and you're doing stuff like this, and I just want to be on. Where's Joanna going? Give me the flashlight. I'll go with her.
Thank you very much. I like hearing that.
Exactly.
No, and hey, Tom, thank you. It really has been an absolute pleasure, listening to you today and just getting to know you a little bit. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. We both do, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't kidding when I said you're one of my heroes. You are for sure one of my heroes, and thank you so much for being part of the show.
Well, we got a lot more work to do, guys. Joanne, we got more work to do. We're gonna keep rocking, right?
Yes, we
All
do.
right. All right, guys. Thanks a lot for having me.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.